The UN General Assembly has officially kicked off its 71st session with a promise to address some of the world's most pressing issues, from human rights to climate change, terrorism to poverty. But what difference will another year make as conflicts abound and humanitarian crises persist? Our UN correspondent Li Ling Tan joins us live from New York for more. Hello there, Li Ling. Well, first of all, tell us about the opening ceremony of the session and what's topping the agenda.
Well, for this General Assembly for the UN, the 71st session began with this opening ceremony in which we saw a changing of the guard as Fiji's Peter Thomson replaces Denmark's Mogens Lykketoft. Now, in this opening ceremony, it was a poignant one where Peter Thomson held up the UN Charter in his right hand as he recited the oath of office, as he took his oath of office. He also said that the UN will strive to find new ways to, and I'm looking at the list here, find new ways to sustain peace, end conflicts, fight terrorism and manage refugee and migrant flows, as well as resolve humanitarian crises. Now, this session was really just the opening ceremony. The big event really kicks off next week when world leaders will convene in New York, as they have every year, for these high-level debates. The week-long affair will also see several high-level summits, and topping the agenda for these summits will be the ongoing refugee crisis, described as the largest refugee crisis of our time. Two summits will be held by the UN Secretary General and US President Barack Obama to generate a stronger international response to help refugees and migrants. Also on the agenda next week, climate change, or more specifically, the Paris Climate Agreement, which, as we know, recently received a major boost after China and the US ratified that deal. So we'll be hearing a lot more about where that deal stands and what more needs to be done. But also, this UN General Assembly session is kicking off amidst a growing international concern over the DPRK's nuclear testing. Pyongyang recently as Friday, conducted its fifth and most powerful nuclear test that drew international condemnation. The US wants stronger action from the Security Council, including from Pyongyang's strongest ally, China, to enforce existing sanctions. And even though the DPRK issue isn't scheduled to be discussed in any of the summit during the high-level week, it is an overarching concern, and with so many world leaders here, this will no doubt be top of mind in behind the scenes in bilateral and sideline meetings.
Right, well, Li Ling, indeed, a series of pressing issues will be addressed at this session, including a lot of conflicts and unresolved crises in the world. And then the question is, what difference can the UN General Assembly really make this year under the new leadership, and especially since UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is also leaving his office at the end of the year?
That's right. Some very good questions there. Now, let's start with the good news. An area that we could see a lot of progress is, of course, the Paris climate deal. As I mentioned, the U.S. and China have both ratified that deal, being the biggest greenhouse gas emitters in the world. That pushes the deal forward, and expectations are that the deal can enter into force sooner than expected. So the next year we could see follow through on that deal, on some of the bigger tasks that lay ahead. Now, the same also goes for the Sustainable Development Goals that enter the second year. Goals that include ending poverty and hunger and promoting health and education. Now, the bad news is the uncertainty. As you mentioned, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon is leaving office at the end of the year, but also the UN's biggest financer and major power, the United States, will have a new president in January. These are two key positions here, two key highly influential entities here. One is the UN's moral authority, and the other is the UN's biggest backer and funder. And with this changing of the guard, both at the UN and with the US presidency, it raises a good measure of uncertainty, especially in dealing with some of the most protracted conflicts, Syria, but also Libya, Yemen, and South Sudan.
Thank you very much, Li Ling Tan, reporting from New York.